And welcome back, class, to the True and Accurate History of Mongolia, Part 3. Now, when we left off, we were at war with Suleiman of the Ottoman Empire and Gandhi of India. Things weren't going too well. Genghis Khan had conquered Konya, but had had the city retaken, and in that loss also was the death of Temur Khan, one of his trusted lieutenants, who had made some mistakes along with Genghis Khan during that brief war. Now here we can see the Indians are moving elephants into the fray, and at first Genghis Khan was terrified. He had never actually seen creatures such as these before, tamed in such a way. So he was worried, he was scared, and so were those Keshik who were sent out to fight them. Fortunately, the Keshik turned out to be more than a match for these war elephants, and took them down with hardly any effort at all. So Konya had been taken, and Genghis Khan was beginning to think that maybe he needed a little more preparation for this war. Unfortunately, he was also extremely stubborn and arrogant, and if the enemy were not going to beg for mercy, then he was certainly not going to back down, regardless of the odds stacked against him, which were fairly high at this time, with two well-armed nations arrayed against his warmongering. Now the Keshik again proved to be extremely effective even against the enemy horsemen, but so too were the pikemen, who devastated them just as the pikemen would devastate the horsemen of Mongolia were they not armed with ranged weaponry. It was around this time that Genghis Khan began making use of the technology of the barbarians that Turfan had witnessed before, the galleys. He was beginning to figure out how to make things which floated on the water effectively as well. So that was a great leap forward for the Mongol Empire technologically and in terms of future expansion, as we will see in the next few hundred years. For now, Genghis wanted to retake Konya and hold it more effectively than he had before, and Suleiman did not respond well to this. But due to his determination, the people of Mongolia were 100% behind him, and a new golden age dawned, an era of prosperity. This is the era of the first war with the Ottoman Empire. He was making a comeback as compared to their performance earlier in the war. Now that they were better prepared, better aware of what Suleiman could field against them, they were ready. And so a new Mongol horde began to prepare itself. More pikemen were called down, more Keshik were trained, and they were very quickly sicked on Konya once again in 940, making a rally. See here, they're making a strong push down towards Konya, with the Keshik shrugging off the attacks of the city, and Beshbalk up there is being under watch by the Indians, but it's not a huge concern for Genghis Khan. And this time they're very prudently destroying all of the enemy defenders they can find before moving against the city. Genghis Khan had been finding this to be an effective strategy and was quickly making it his mainstay battle strategy for a siege. Defeat the support first, then take the city. And this turned out to be an extremely effective method, especially combined with the power and maneuverability of the Keshik horsemen. You can see here pikemen are coming in. The pikemen, with their pikes, are able to break down the city walls once the defenders have been defeated and once the fortifications have been overrun by the Keshik. Then it is up to the pikemen to break through the walls and let the Keshik into the city, where they can deal with the remnants of the opposition and take slaves and so on and so forth. Seeing that defeat was imminent, Suleiman begged for peace and essentially submitted to Mongol occupation and gave all of his resources to Mongolia in return for sparing his cities and sparing him the humiliation of total defeat. Genghis Khan allowed this, not because he didn't want to conquer the Ottoman Empire, but because it gave him time to build up a stronger strategy. Gandhi also capitulated in the same year under the similar conditions. He simply did not have the power to stand up against the Mongol horde. So Genghis Khan decided that he would give himself an advantage by moving south through the Ottoman Empire, through which he was now allowed completely free passage, towards one of the three remaining city-states on the continent, Edinburgh. Genghis Khan's plan was to move down and take Edinburgh in order to give himself a power base from which he could strike directly at the capital of the Ottoman Empire once the peace treaty expired, or once he simply felt it was time to make his play. And this would put him in a much stronger position if he could take the capital first, and from there sweep through the rest of the Ottoman Empire with the head properly decapitated. So his troops moved down through the Ottoman Empire towards Edinburgh. Here we can see the first naval vessel moving out to begin fishing operations, which were a revelation to the Khans. So we can see this new Khan, actually Mongke Khan, is heading the attack on Edinburgh, which is beginning in 1040 AD. You can see right there. And Mongke Khan was Genghis Khan's newest trusted lieutenant, the replacement for Temur Khan, and was actually Temur Khan's younger brother. Mongke had always been overshadowed by his older brother in the daily tournaments that Genghis held to determine who were the strongest and who were the most powerful and who were those who would have the right to lead sorties against the enemies of Mongolia. And Mongke had always been physically weaker than Temur Khan, which put him at a disadvantage in the heavily martial Mongol Empire. But he was a very smart and capable man. And you just see here some barbarians being taken out. So Mongke Khan was very smart and capable, and as it turned out, he was an excellent student of tactics. And because of this, Genghis Khan was willing to overlook his physical shortcomings in favor of allowing him to prove his tactical merits, which he very quickly did during the brief siege of Edinburgh, which lasted only as long as it took for the pikemen to make their way down and bust open the gates, where the Keshik, who had already bombarded the city into submission by that point. See here, Edinburgh is having a difficult time of holding out against the violent assault of Mongolia. And there is the first trireme, a sailing ship created using the barbarian technology, which Genghis Khan hopes to map the edges of the continent and perhaps find new passages to other parts of the world which he has not yet found. Because, as we know, his goal is to conquer the entire world, not simply one continent, though as far as anyone knew, that single continent was the known world. Even so, Genghis Khan was an ambitious man, and he was hoping, not dreading, but hoping that there were lands beyond this one, where perhaps stronger opponents could be found. And we see there, the Keshik are moving already up towards Istanbul, the capital of the Ottoman Empire, planning already to betray their promise of peace and to conquer the Ottoman Empire as soon as Edinburgh has fallen, giving them a support base or a base of operations in the south on the opposite end of the Ottoman Empire from Karakorum. And there we go. 1080 AD, Edinburgh is captured. Mongke Khan moves in to enforce order, and plans have already been underway for a long time by now to complete the conquest of Istanbul. But now it's actually beginning. Let's see, some of the Keshik are rowing out in some rafts that they've built to get a better tactical view of the peninsula off which Istanbul is built. There's a strong harbor they have which gives them a good defensive position, but not as good as if they had built on the peninsula, which is what Genghis Khan would have done in their place. However, the harbor gives them a better economic trade basis, which was Suleiman's main concern. Unfortunately for him, trade was the last thing on Genghis Khan's mind. If you want to let me know actually what you think of the new render settings, I noticed that episode 1 of season 2 was really bright and washed out. Episode 2 I think was a little bit too dark, so I'm tweaking the render settings a little more for episode 3 here. Let me know what you think. Is this too dark, too bright, too saturated? And there we go. Beginning of the war in 1120. Well, not quite the beginning, but Suleiman at this point realizes that he is about to be betrayed, and he actually springs a trap, which proves to be extremely effective against Genghis Khan, at least in terms of delaying what the Khan sees as inevitable and what Suleiman sees as abominable. So we see, starts the war, and at that exact moment, Suleiman managed to trigger a series of earthquakes using thumping technology, using the elephants that he had borrowed from Gandhi, and managed to make it seem like earthquakes were ravaging the area, which scared the horses and forced the Keshik out of the immediate area, costing them valuable time and throwing their formation into disarray. As you had seen, Mongke had set them up to have an excellent tactical start before the elephant ploy, which threw them all out of whack. Now they have to scramble to get back into position, but that only makes them angrier in the end, giving them more of an edge against the city. That's not the only advantage that Suleiman has left. In order to strike Istanbul from Edinburgh, they have to pass Edirne, a smaller city, which nonetheless is supported by several troops which Genghis Khan and Mongke Khan had missed during their survey of the area on the way to Edinburgh. So these troops swooped in an effort to throw the Keshik off, but they were not really any match for the Keshik. Unfortunately, the same could not be said for the pikemen, who were much slower and were trying to make their way up towards Istanbul from Edinburgh, but that left them open not only to Edirne, the city itself, but also to the warriors who protected it. And Suleiman very shrewdly managed to station some archers there, who proved to be quite problematic for the pikemen, as we can see here. They're attacked from the catapults in Istanbul, they're attacked by the archers in Edirne, and then the warriors swoop in to finish them off. This is a huge setback in 1160 AD for the Mongols. Without the pikemen, they cannot break into Istanbul, and they are not able to take the city until a new group of pikemen can make it up to bust down the doors. So this is extremely frustrating to Mongke, who is trying to prove his worth to Genghis Khan, and extremely frustrating to Genghis Khan, who had been hoping for a swift conquest of Istanbul. So he launches a pincer attack down towards Konya with a smaller force in the north. Seeing as Istanbul is ripe for the taking, all it needs is a team of pikemen to come and bust down the doors. There's nothing else that the city is capable of doing to defend itself other than injuring the Keshik with the catapult. So in order to split and divide Suleiman's attention, Genghis Khan launches a pincer attack from the north towards Konya, and Suleiman tries to send out merchants to try and get to the nearby city-states to get them to help him out through bribes, but Genghis Khan is not letting that happen either. Istanbul is still on the verge of falling. They're only waiting for the new batch of pikemen to make it up from Edinburgh. Up at Konya, there's pikemen already there, as they were in the north, but we're going to see how that plays out with the rest of the conquest of the Ottoman Empire, whether or not Genghis succeeds next time. So until then, all the best.